Today we are going to discuss a topic which is from Indian Politics 2, which really this paper refers to the political processes and also focuses on the state level politics in India. So the title of my module today, the topic of this module which I am going to present before you, is the state politics as a discipline, that the emergence of the autonomy of the state politics as a discipline. So I would argue at the outset that of late we have seen that the state politics has got a kind of autonomy. The state politics as a discipline has got a great recognition, because not many years ago, the state politics was seen as a kind of appendage of national Indian politics, all India level politics. So everybody would study the India level politics. India as a nation state was seen as a kind of unit of analysis. So there was a much less literature in the arena of the state politics. The states were not really considered worthy of being considered as the unit of analysis, and there was hardly any discipline called state politics. So what are the factors which really explain to you the emergence of the state politics as a kind of discipline, as an autonomous discipline, separate from Indian politics, having its own identity, having its own autonomy? And when I'm saying that the emergence of the state politics as an autonomous discipline, as a kind of independent discipline, is a recent phenomena, I can refer to the dearth of literature in the arena of state politics in the first years of India's independence. Now the first really very important work which came in arena of state politics came in 1967, when Myron Weiner, American political scientist who was teaching in Princeton University, he edited a volume called State Politics in India, and as I said, it was in 1967. So after 20 years of India's independence. Before that, you have no literature in the field of state politics. After 1967, another 9-10 years, in 1976, you have another edited volume on state politics, and that is edited by Itwal Narayan. And then the third volume on the state politics which came into existence was by John Wood, and that was in 1984. Just like before going to the election for Lok Sabha in 1984, this volume came. And then after that also, you do not have many other volumes on the state politics. You have a volume edited by me for Routledge. You have another volume which has come up recently by Professor M.P. Singh and others, which also is titled State Politics in India. The edited volume, which was edited by me on state politics, was called the Rethinking State Politics in India, Regions Within Regions. So I would say that of late there has been a much literature on the state politics, and that probably very well underlines the increasing importance of the state politics as a discipline. But there was a period, and a long period, when the state politics was not really recognized much as a kind of discipline which should have been considered as a kind of autonomous discipline. So in this presentation, let me discuss the factors which explain the emergence of the state politics as a discipline, because as I said that the title of this module is the emergence of the state politics as a discipline in an autonomous manner. When we talk about the state politics, let me say that when you sift through the literature on state politics, you come through, and I would argue in my presentation, and I've argued in my module also, that you can talk about 3 generations of state politics literature. The first generation I would refer would be from 1967 to 1983, the John Wood, I said, the Myron Weiner edited volume, then Itwal Narayan edited volume, and then you have the John Wood edited volume. So these 3 volumes I would put in the first generation of studies on the field of state politics. The second generation of studies, I would refer those volumes which are state-specific volumes which came up in the 80s and the 90s, which basically focus on one state only, which does not really have a kind of comparative framework agenda to compare to have an interstate comparison or to have an intra-state comparison. They basically focus on one state as a unit of analysis, and the volume, the literature focuses on only one state. And then there is a third generation. So I'm referring to 3 generations of studies, as I told you at the outset. The third generation of study in the field of state politics, I would say that this is a pretty recent phenomena which has come up in the last 10-15 years, when you have a greater interest among the political scientists, India studies people, state politics wallahs, to have a kind of more and more comparative analysis, to adopt the comparative method to study the state politics, to have an interstate or intra-state comparative analysis in order to understand the state politics. So these are the 3 generations of the studies, and all the generations in this presentation we will discuss that what has been the respective contribution of all the 3 generations of studies in the field of state politics and how they have contributed. And can we say that the third generation of the state politics studies is an advancement over the other 2 generations of the state politics? But before answering to these questions, that what are the relative advantages of the 3 generations of the studies in the state politics, let us ask this question, that why state politics is becoming more and more important. The simple answer would be that state politics as a discipline is becoming more and more important because of the emergence of the state as important political and economic units, as we have discussed in another module in this paper called Indian Politics Part 2 itself. So let me summarize very quickly why the states have become politically and economically powerful. There are certain factors which I would quickly sum up for your benefit. One would be the kind of identity politics we are seeing in India today, the kind of the politics which revolve, which veer around the mobilization of the people based on their identity. See, in India, unlike the Western countries, unlike the older democracies like Britain, you do not have mobilization of the people on the basis of the policies or on the basis of the programs or on the basis of the, I would say, even performance of the state's regime or the party in power or the incumbent party. It is also not so much on ideology, because you see the parties' manifestos. Most of the parties' manifestos look alike, and there is not really much alternative. We have many state parties, but we do not have really many alternative economic or political agenda. So most of the party manifesto, party agenda, you refer to the speeches of the parties, they look alike. They are very much similar to each other. Because there is not much mobilization on the basis of ideology or on the basis of the economic policies, programs, there is much more proclivity, much more inclination to mobilize people in the name of caste, religion, region, language, script, tribalism, or simply a kind of any other narrow, parochial, primordial identity. And as argued in my other module presentation also, that most of these identities are territorially bound, and you find these identities which are sought to be mobilized by political parties, and not only by the state parties only, but also by the national parties. These identities are confined within the state boundary. So this is one factor which I would like to draw your attention to, that the kind of identity politics which is taking place in India basically privilege state as kind of economy, as a political unit for the analysis. Because if you study the identity politics, if you study the politics of electoral politics, or you study, so either you study electoral politics or you study the movement politics, you have to put the emphasis on the study of the states. That goes without saying. Like you study the kind of reservation movement, you study the Jat agitation movement. Let us take this example. Jat agitation movement is confined to Haryana. So even when you have Jats in Rajasthan or you Jats in UP, Western UP, you do not have any impact. you have only the Jat agitation in Haryana, not in the neighboring states. So our identities, even if the nomenclature is the same, they are called the same identity, they share the same name, they do not really relate to each other. So states become state boundaries. States have emerged as a kind of a very fixed kind of political territory, having its own identity, having its own. Even you refer to like the state like Madhya Pradesh, which was called leftover state, which was supposed not to have any identity of its own. But now you have a distinctive identity of Madhya Pradesh. The Madhya Pradesh saying that we are no longer the Bimaru state, we are no longer the Sikh states, we have emerged. So there is a distinctive Madhya Pradesh identity. And there is a very distinctive Chhattisgarhi identity in Chhattisgarh. So that is true for almost all the states, that even in the Hindi heartland states that like UP, Bihar and all, they have developed a state-specific distinctive political identity, which really brings focus on the state. This would be my first point. Second point, very quickly, you also, if you think of the kind of the party structure which has emerged in India, there has been a much fragmentation in the party system. And because of the decline of the national party and the rise of the state parties, again you bring the state into the focus. And here, as you know, that the most of the governments which have been formed since 1989 at the center, they have been coalition government. Even now we have a coalition government in the 16th Lok Sabha. And there have been coalition government even at the state level. And there you have the massive presence of the state parties, and they are getting the plum post, they are having the better bargaining power. So that's another factor. The emergence of the state parties after the decline of the national party also brings focus on the state. And in turn, it brings focus on the state politics as a discipline. The third factor I also right to say would be the rise of the state level leadership. And there you find that the many state leaders are becoming more and more powerful and having their national impact. There is another political factor, dimension of the whole issue I would like to point out, and that is the sub-national diplomacy. See, if you refer to the Constitution of India, 7th schedule, wide Article 246, the subjects have been divided between the center and the state. You have three lists, as you must be aware, the central list, state list, and the concurrent list. Now, if you read the listing, the subjects, you would find that the foreign policy, the international affairs, that's under the jurisdiction of the union government. But over the period, what you find is that even in terms of the making of the foreign policy, the states are playing very important role. Whether it's a Tista Water Treaty, that with the West Bengal, which is being proposed, is being opposed by West Bengal Trinamool Congress leaders, and that's why Tista Water Treaty has not been really signed, even when we have a very strong central government and a strong leader in the form of Narendra Modi. This treaty has not been signed. And then there are other treaties which have been already signed, but they are being opposed, like the Indus Water Treaty. Indus Water Treaty was signed between India and Pakistan with regard to the redistribution of the water, of river water, which the two countries share. And now the PDP as well as National Conference in Jammu Kashmir, they are raising question about it. Then you have Bihar, the Kosi, the Indo-Nepal Treaty. Now the Nitish Kumar, who is a powerful state level leader of Bihar, right now he is in alliance with the BJP. Earlier he was with the RJD, Rashtriya Janata Dal. He has been also saying, and that is not his stand, his party stand also, that there should be greater say of Bihar in any treaty which is signed between India and Nepal. Same is true for Tamil Nadu. Like, see the Tamil issue, because you have a sizable population of Tamil in Sri Lanka, and there has been stories of the atrocities against the Tamil. So whenever it comes to the India-Sri Lanka relationship, the Dravida parties, both DMK as well as AIDMK, they have been putting pressure. They have been trying to influence the making of the India's foreign policy with regard to Sri Lanka. So that also, and there is a greater recognition because in the Foreign Policy Ministry, there is a separate cell to liaison with the state chief ministers. So that also explained to you that even on the subjects which fall under the jurisdiction of the center, like the foreign policy, the states are now increasingly trying to influence the policies of the center. So I referred the role of the identity politics, I referred to the rise of the state parties, the rise of the state level leaders. I also referred to the subnational diplomacy, the state playing important role in the framing of the foreign policy, the state chief ministers accompanying the prime minister on his foreign visit. When Prime Minister of India went to Myanmar, chief ministers went there from the northeast. When Indian Prime Minister went to Bangladesh, and then the West Bengal chief minister accompanied him. So this has been a trend in recent India which really underlines the increasing political importance of the states. States are also becoming important in the economic sense, and this also I have discussed in another module where I have referred to the new economic policies, I have referred to the economic reforms which have been undergoing the process since 1991, consolidation of the economic reforms. The regimes have come and gone, but the economic reforms process have not really been interrupted. In fact, there has been a greater economic reforms with every change in the government. And these economic reforms also have brought states as the autonomous economic units. And states are competing against each other, especially the progressive states, and states are competing each other for attracting the foreign investment. They are competing against each other for attracting the corporate houses based in India. They are competing for getting more and more central assistance, because now central assistance is also based on the respective performance of the states. Then the state parties become the partner in the coalition government at the center, a party like DMK, AIDMK, and being the part of the government at the center, they also use their position to ask for more and more share of the central grants for their own state. So even in the economic terms, you find that the states are now emerging as autonomous economic actors. So states are not only the political platform, states are also emerging as an autonomous economic platform, taking their own decisions, approving the investment, approving the projects. You refer to the special economic zone, you refer to EPZ, SEZ, all these, you refer to the labor policies, you refer to the kind of the land policy, land usage policy. It's all being done by the state government. It is all being done at the state level. The center is not really very keen to interfere much in the affairs, in the economic or political affairs of the states. So that also is another factor, and so you can see that the states are really emerging as important units, and that also undermines the importance of the state politics as a discipline. Now coming to the state politics as a discipline, the literature, like the one question that emerges very clearly, that if the states are now powerful, states were earlier also, states were not really that they were only a kind of a peripheral states, they also played an important role. So why earlier the states were not really considered as the unit of analysis? Why there was a neglect of the state as the unit of analysis? I would refer 2-3 factors which would explain to you. First, I have already told you about the Congress dominance. So they would say that why should we study the state level politics when both the state government and the central government are dominated by the Congress party? So whatever the policy of the Congress at the center is, would be followed by the state. So state politics, state economic policy, state politics, that would be a carbon copy, a Xerox copy of the central politics. So why should, because high command was deciding everything, so why should we really waste our energy to study the state level politics? So that would be the one factor. The second factor would be that the state politics was considered as a kind of parochial politics. There was so much emphasis on nation building, state building. So they would say that why should we study the state? Why should we study the narrow thing? We should study the national politics, all India level politics. There would be a third factor also. And that factor was the influence of the American Political Science Association. You know, this whole literature about modernization, political development theory, and subsequently the critique of political development theory and the modernization theory in the form of dependency theory, underdevelopment theory, and all those area studies, whether from the liberal perspective or from the Marxist perspective, whether political modernization theory, development theory, or underdevelopment, dependency, or the world economic system. You know, you refer to this A.G. France, Amir Amin, Immanuel Wallerstein, or you refer to political development theory, Almond, Powell, Verba, or you refer to the post-colonial state theory, Hamza Alavi, Anupam Sen, or John Saul and others. All these important, influential thinkers, the analysts of the world politics and the national politics, they are the political analysts, the leading political scientists of the world. They focused on India, or they focused on a nation state as the unit of analysis. So the country was, you have this politics of the developing countries, you know, politics of the developing areas. So when they referred area, they basically referred a country. Like it would be dependent state. So when they would say dependent state or underdeveloped economy, then underdeveloped economy, peripheral economy would be the economy of a nation state, economy of a country. They would not really go beyond, and they would consider all the third world state, third world within quote, all the third world state or the developing states, they had one common factor, and that was their colonial past, and they all had this colonial mode of production. So they were comparable to each other, and political development theory would say that all the developing states were at the takeoff stage, and they would take off, they would go from backwardness to modernity to development by following on the footsteps of the Western countries, the Western democracies. So there was a lot of uniformity, there was a lot of generalization, and there the nuances, the interstate, the differences within the nation states were not really addressed. So all these three factors I said, one, the too much influence of the development theory, modernization theory, and the world system, dependency, and the development theories, which focused on the nation state as the unit of analysis. The second factor, I said that in India there was a dominance of the Congress party, so it was considered that the state politics was too much determined by the national politics. State politics was a carbon copy of the national politics. The third factor I referred was that too much emphasis on nation building or the state building, institution building in the aftermath of nationalist movement and in India getting independence. There was a kind of stigma, there was a kind of indifference towards the state level studies. It was considered too parochial, too narrow. So it was really a welcome development when in 1967, Meyer Wiener, a leading political scientist from Princeton University, as I told you, had a conference and then published an edited volume on the state politics. It was followed by Iqbal Narayan, a political scientist from Rajasthan University, Jaipur, who also edited a volume, again titled the same, State Politics in India. And then the third volume, as I told you, was edited by John Wood. What was the contribution of these three volumes, the first generation of the state politics? The contribution was that they were all empirical. They provided lots of data which have been worked upon by the subsequent political scientists. And so as such, their contribution cannot be denied, their contribution cannot be undermined. But at the same time, these studies were from the political sociological viewpoint, and they really did not refer to the economic part. And there you have the contribution of Francine Frankel and M.S.A. Rao edited volume, which came in 1990, the two volumes which came in 1990, which really took the political economy aspect to the study of the state politics. So let us consider M.S. Rao, Francine Frankel volume also as a part of the first generation of the studies. Now, the common weakness of all these literature was that they did not really refer to the comparative approach. They did not, the essay writers, the chapter writers in all the 4 volumes I referred, like the Myron Wiener volume, then you had the Iqbal Narayan volume, then you had the John Wood volume, and then you had a M.S. Rao volume, M.S. Rao and Francine Frankel volume. All these 3-4 volumes, you had state-specific chapters, but there was never any attempt to compare one state with another state. There was this thinking that all the states are so distinct from each other, they have this segmented political and economic structure. The happenings in one, as Iqbal Narayan said succinctly, that the happenings in one state does not really influence the happenings in another state. So on the one hand, they considered the state politics as a carbon copy of the national politics. On the other hand, they also thought that the state politics was too volatile, too dynamic, to have a kind of a common, too distinct from each other, to have common framework to study the state politics as an autonomous discipline. They were really happy to consider the state as the unit of analysis. As I was telling you, the first generation of the studies, they really provided valuable inputs in the form of lots of empirical information. They gave you very valuable information about the caste configuration, about the, for example, Francine Frankel, M.S. Rao volume had lots of essays which talk about the changing power structure at the rural level, how the traditional dominant caste, their influence, their power influence were being challenged by the emergent middle caste peasantry in the rural India, in the village India. The second generation of the studies, if you refer, there have been lots of studies which have focused on, like you have Jatpal Singh, you have Rekha Chaudhary, you have many other, Amit Prakash, is working on Jharkhand, Rekha Chaudhary on Kashmir, Jatpal Singh on UP, you have Joy Hassan also working on Uttar Pradesh politics. So you have lots of literature which have come up, which are focused on states, a particular state, and the politics and the economy of that particular state. But the second generation of studies also have not really attempted comparative framework, and they have really focused on one particular state. And there also you have a major lacuna, and that is that when you study the states, you must study the state level leadership also. But there is hardly any study which takes the leadership as a subject of study. Why this is so? There can be certain factor. One factor can be the state patronage. You know, you have most of the leadership studies which focus on 1 or 2 leaders, 3 leaders, like Gandhi, Indira Gandhi, Nehru, maybe Ambedkar, but not many. Of late, as you can see, that there is a greater focus on Patel. But there are many other state level leaders who have not really been studied. And these state level leaders, they left their imprint on the politics of their own state. So why they have not been studied? One factor has been that there has been this feeling that the state party leadership or the state level leadership, they did not leave much imprint on the national politics. So their influence on the national politics, their influence in shaping the state, the national level politics and national level economy has been not really appreciated, recognized much. The second factor why state leadership has not been studied much would be that the state leaders have been mostly seen from the framework of their community that they come from, or it's more a focus on the community politics, the identity politics, than the focus on the leader as an agency. That would be the second. So when you study the Lalu Yadav, you do not study the Lalu Yadav politics, the leadership model of Lalu Yadav, or the language, or his leadership style. You basically see him as the product of the quota politics or the emergence of lower caste or the backward caste politics. The third factor, which is also you can refer for the neglect of the state level politics, would be that many times, and especially in the radical literature, in the Marxist literature, it is seen the state leaders are merely an instrument. They are governed by, they are directed by political and economic imperative. They follow the logic of the structure. now we come to the third generation, which is most exciting piece of literature that of late, and as I referred my own edited volume, The Rethinking State Politics in India, the regions within regions. Now there's a greater attempt to compare one state with another state. And this process started with Atul Kohli in 1986 when he wrote this book, State and Poverty in India, followed it with another comparative volume having the three-state perspective on the issue, on the subject of governability. And then you have other political scientists like Ashutosh Varshney, who has referred city as the unit of analysis. And then you have Subrata Mitra, who has also studied the governance thing, having the three-state analysis. You have Rob Jenkins. You have many other political scientists. Prerna Singh is a new entrant. Asima Sinha, Regional Roots of Development in India. So you have Asima Sinha, Prerna Singh, Rob Jenkins, Ashutosh Varshney, Atul Kohli, Subrata Mitra, and you have many other leaders, political analysts, who have adopted this comparative framework, and they have studied either two-state analysis like Rob Jenkins or three-state analysis like Atul Kohli, or they have gone beyond states like me, who have referred to the sub-regions within the state. And there you have a clear-cut advancement in the field of the state politics, because when you study the sub-regions, because you know every state has got the historical, cultural sub-regions which are becoming politically more and more salient, getting their political recognition. So on the one hand, when the states are emerging, as Yogendra Yadav and Suhas Parshikar have argued in one of their influential articles, that on the one hand, the states have become important political and economic units, autonomous in a way, when the states have got their distinctive political identity. On the other hand, within the state also, the sub-regions are also emerging in a big way, having their own political identity. And so there's a need to go beyond the states, and that would be my concluding observation, that we need to privilege more and more the third generation of the state politics, where we go beyond the state. We have the interstate comparison. We also take sub-regions. We take the big cities like, see, the cities like Bangalore, the cities like Calcutta, the cities like Bombay, Mumbai. They are important political units. How many assembly constituencies you have in Calcutta? How many assembly constituencies you have in Bangalore? The kind of population the cities have. And under the new economic policies, the cities like Chennai, Bangalore, Pune, Mumbai, Nashik, they are emerging as economic unit in their own. You refer to NCR, National Capital Region in Delhi. They are economic units in their own analysis and straddling the state boundaries. NCR, for example, National Capital Region, has the territory which falls in Delhi, which falls in UP, which falls in Haryana. And it's a one economic unit where you have all the investment, corporate houses, companies, SEZ, they're all being built up, and they are becoming economic units. There's a need to go beyond the traditional way of thinking in the state politics, to have a comparison, to challenge the conventional way of thinking, conventional way of theory building, and to look for the smaller units. And I'm not saying that those studies which took the nation state as the unit of analysis are superfluous. But you also need to have another kind of take on the national politics, and that take should be from below. When you study the states and you try to see these smaller pictures and to draw the bigger picture, and probably then you can capture the nuances, you can capture the smaller details which really help you in having a better theory building about the politics of India, and also a better theory building of the politics and the economy of a particular state. So thank you very much for listening to me. I hope the presentation was helpful to you for understanding have a better understanding of state politics as a discipline. Thank you very much.